Hi there, my name's Sarah Tianhara, and I work in student engagement and career development. All that means is I work with students in regards to any leadership opportunities that tie them to campus that aren't academic, and then I work in career services. On the screen, you can see my contact information, stianhara@nicoletcollege.edu, and my phone number is 715-365-4566. My office is located in the Lakeside Center in 223. We're going to cover a lot of information in regards to resumes, cover letters, and a quick note about references. If you don't have any of this information started, don't worry. I hope you do, but don't worry because I'm always here to help. You can contact me after you watch this presentation. You can reach out to me at any time, stop by my office. I'm always happy to help. So we're going to start with the resumes. I'll go over some information, the different types, and then show you some actual practical examples, which is what typically helps students. We'll talk about cover letters, some do's and don'ts, and then references. So let's start with basic information. If your resume and the idea of doing this is overwhelming to you, starting with basic information might be a great place to start. And when I run workshops, this is how I tend to do it. Number one is your contact information. This hopefully is the least overwhelming piece of the process. This is where you're obviously going to put your name in a place that's legible and readable. But with that, it gets a little more complicated. So you need to make sure you have a phone number and an email address that people can contact you at. Your phone number on the other end needs to have a voicemail that is set up. It is very frustrating for an employer to call your voicemail and it say things like, the Verizon user has not set up this voicemail, or the voicemail inbox of this number is full. So it's important that you take a look at that you make sure that your voicemail is ready to go, and that you pick an email that's appropriate. If you choose your Nicolet email, that might not work down the road because if you're not a student, are you going to continue to check that? If you have a job currently and you have a work email with that, might not be the best idea to let people know that you're job searching on company time. So sometimes a solid personal email is a great choice, but you've got to decide for you. Then this is where it starts to get tricky for people, so I say let's just start with the headings. Now it's important for your resume to reflect you and what you find important. There is not a one-size-fits-all organization for a resume. For example, I spent a lot of time getting my education. So my master's degree is something that's very important to me. So my education is the first thing that's on my resume. And I work in education. So it's what makes the most sense for me. If you believe your work experience speaks louder than your education, that's fine. Choose your work experience first. Then you can have opportunities like achievements, volunteering, honors and awards, whatever you want it to be for all of your headings. Within the nursing field, it's also completely appropriate to have a clinical section on your resume because that's how you get a lot of your practical experience. So think about that when you're deciding what your headings might look like. Other information to think about, certifications. So let's say your basic life support, AED, any of those things are very appropriate to have. Along in this technology age would be computer skills. If you've worked anywhere with electronic medical records, if you are just excellent at certain computer things, I would go ahead and list those. If your skills are any less than proficient, I would leave them off of your resume. So there are 3 typical resume formats, and we'll go through each one individually, and I'll show you some examples. Chronological is definitely the most common. It's what makes people the most comfortable. This is where you list your information in reverse order. So the job you have the most currently, and then you go backwards from there without any gaps. This works really well for someone with a traditional job history. The problem is if you don't have a traditional job history or you've switched fields, this may be tricky for you. And there's an answer to that. The answer used to be a functional resume. This is what job centers across the country would tell you to do if you have job gaps. And some of those gaps could just be staying at home with your kids. Some of those gaps might be getting sick and taking off of work because of whatever you needed to do to get better, maybe taking care of a family member, stepping away from the job field, or changing careers. Functional resumes focus on skills instead of listing chronologically the jobs that you've had. The problem with the functional resume, and the one I would guide you away from, is that employers see these as red flags. They're wondering what your job history actually looks like. The answer to that is a hybrid or combination resume. This takes that chronological resume, matches it with functional, and makes it work for employers. It works for people. Let's say you used to be in accounting and now you want to be in healthcare. This works to take transferable skills and make them understandable for employers. So I'll show you an example of that. First, let's start with tips. A few tips on a resume. You should have a resume at all times ready to go. If your dream job came knocking today, would you have a resume to share with that employer? If they said, hey, it was so great to meet you, could you get me that resume today? Your answer is hopefully yes with a couple tweaks. It's a living, breathing document that you need to edit at all times. It's great if you have a very large document with all the things you've done, and then you can pick and choose for whatever resume you need to use at that moment. Because you're going to need to tailor that resume to whatever job you're applying for. Keywords are incredibly important. When you see a job posting, you're going to see things like the exact skills that they want to have, the different communication, the different technology pieces, and it's important that you use the words they're using. So let's say you've been a supervisor, a clinical supervisor somewhere your whole life. Well, they're looking for a manager. They're exactly the same thing with a different title. So guess what? You're going to change it to management experience on yours because it works for that employer. Don't make them work hard. If you are transferring from our area to a larger job, let's say you're going to go down to Madison or Minneapolis or somewhere with a much larger job market. It's important that you pay attention to the keywords within a job posting because large cities and large firms are going to have many applicants. And the way they screen those people out is using software. That software will feed your resume into their database and double check for keywords. If they don't find the amount of keywords they're looking for, your resume is going to the no pile. At the end of the day, your job is to make sure that hiring manager doesn't have to work hard, that your resume speaks so loudly that they have to choose you for an interview. Your resume should definitely be clear and concise. It shouldn't look like I ripped it out of a book. If I have to read your resume top to bottom, I'm probably going to lose interest partway through. A lot of hiring managers spend only 6 seconds taking a look at your resume to start with and putting it in the yes or no pile. They don't go back to the no pile unless their yes pile is too small. So make sure it's clear and concise. In that, not too concise. If there's so much white space that I don't think you have any job experience, you have a problem as well. The appearance is absolutely key. You only have so many documents to share with an employer to get you an interview. Make sure you use that real estate well. Hopefully, in that 6 seconds that they're taking to look at your resume, certain things stand out. And those things are the things you choose, not grammatical and formatting errors. You want to make sure you're using action words and appropriate ones. So if your resume is full of the words assisted and helped over and over and over again, I think you're misusing the English language a little bit. What I'm hoping you do is take a look at what you've done in those jobs and think about words like created, collaborated, developed, responsible for. There's a lot of excellent words you can use. And if you really just assisted and helped every once in a while, it's okay to have those words in some places, but I think you should branch out a little. Appropriate length is one of the things I am asked about the most. How long can my resume be? The answer is that depends. If you are in a teaching field, if you have a doctorate, if you work in some areas of education in general, you're going to need a CV or a curriculum vitae. Everyone else really just needs a resume. Your CV can be a book. It can be 50 pages long if you need it to be, but a resume, you're capping out at 1 or 2. Many people should be able to fit their resume on 1 page. If you can't, I would argue there's probably some things you can remove, like your high school doesn't need to be on there anymore. If you've got any credentials past high school, there's a lot of things that you can remove, sporting events you were in high school, and even some past jobs, because there is an unnecessary need to include absolutely everything depending on your field. And in nursing, you don't need everything on there, but there isn't a hard and fast rule like there used to be. 10 years used to be the rule. It's different for every person and what your resume looks like. but your resume should be 1 or 2 pages. If it's on 2 pages, I'm going to ask you, what if I never get to that second page? What if the hiring manager just prints out page 1 and never sees page 2? Is there something on page 2 that qualifies you for the job that isn't on page 1? We might want to reorder your resume. And then lastly, you should have someone proofread. You always think you know what's there. You've read it and read it and read it, and it makes sense to you. You might need to have someone proofread and make sure it makes sense to them as well. So this is a quick sample I'll show you that sort of talks about the pieces of a chronological resume. So this is a student with her RN, her contact information, a profile. I'll say you can choose to have a profile, objective, statement, whatever the beginning is, but you don't have to. In my job searching resume, I typically don't have one. It's a great use if you need to explain something, and I'll talk about that when I show you the hybrid resume. If you're explaining why you used to be an accountant and now you're going to the nursing field, it makes things easier for an employer to understand. This person has their professional experience. With the dates, it's very chronological, followed by their education. So this is just one example of how you can utilize a resume. I'm going to pull up a couple examples and slide them over. I will start with my resume just to show you an example of what that might look like. Give me a moment while this opens. Okay, so here's my resume. It's not the one that I typically job search with. It's one in my ePortfolio that I use to share with students. You have options when you're creating a resume. But the one option I would ask you not to choose is a Word template. The problem with templates is that they really limit your options. I've had students say, I can't put this here, it won't let me. Don't let technology tell you what you can and can't do. You can create everything you can see in a template on your own in Word, and I'd be happy to show you that. This is an example of something I created in Word that I use, like I said, just as an example, with a bold top on it. I'll talk about color in one of my examples. This is a simple profile statement at the top. As I said, my education is important to me, so that's first. Then a look at my higher ed experience. That's all listed there. My personal information is off to the right, along with additional education and professional development. So this is sort of a simple but bold example of what a resume can look like. And we'll open a couple other examples. This for one is called a watermark example. So again, it's somewhat bold, but all created within Word. With a profile, their name stands out, obviously. This is a nursing example, so here is their degree in nursing, their technical diplomas. Don't undersell your education. Just because LPN is embedded within nursing doesn't mean that you can ignore it. It's important. That's a credential you earned while you were here. Make sure you don't undersell yourself. And then this has got some work experience, the watermark in the background. And this doesn't have text all over. This isn't full. This is sort of laid out well, easy for an employer to read, and then followed by skills, awards, and honors. So just another example. I would encourage this one to maybe, if they wanted to add clinical experience, just as another example. Let's do some people, I'll show you an example that's sort of a little emptier. Some new students don't always have enough to fill out a full page. We can get really creative with your relevant coursework, your clinicals, different skills and abilities, things you have, and the layout to make sure that that page is full. So this one is a little more whimsical for, say, an early childhood student here at Nicolet, and just different ways you can lay things out. This one has some color in it, but if you print it out in black and white, the green just shows up as gray, so it's still clean lines. I'm going to show you, if you're a little overwhelmed by sort of a bold example, I will show you a very simple example that you can, again, create within Word. This one just has a border at the top, and then different information, you know, Nicolet, CNA, LPN, nursing, clinical room experience, some work experience, and just a really simple way without having to create anything difficult. Within Word, you have tons of options, and as I said, one size does not fit all when it comes to resumes. The last example, just how you can create it in Word. This doesn't have any bold things. This is just how someone might typically start creating a resume within Word. So there's all, like I said, there's no one size fits all. This one's got education after work experience. It really just depends. So these are all chronological, typical, simple. I'm going to show you a hybrid resume because one size does not fit all for students. It's going to take a moment to open. So here's a hybrid example. This is for someone, actually a community member I worked with, who had been a CNA for an incredibly long time and wanted to leave healthcare and take a leadership role. So we decided to use an objective to explain what their transition would look like. We then spent some time talking about important pieces of leadership. So we did that in her summary of qualifications. Now, the difference between a functional and a hybrid resume is here we decided to actually give her work experience. There's no questions about the fact that she has a great work history. It's just that we didn't go into detail about what happened in those jobs. Instead, we listed when they were and where they were, and then chose to focus on her summary of qualifications, her skills and abilities, and then put her education at the bottom, because her work experience is more important as well as her qualifications. So there's obviously different ways that you can put these things together. It just depends on what works for you. Now I said that color can get complicated. So I'm going to pull up a colorful example and tell you sometimes the problems with that. So if you were ever going to print something out in color, I encourage you to print it out in black and white because an employer will probably do it that way. So this one, for example, if you print it out in black and white, it's still completely readable, but it is a little bold. So decide what works for your field and what doesn't. In nursing, I don't know that you need color. Instead, they want to know what skills do you have. You are very sought after in our community and other places. There are nursing shortages all over. But it's important that you present yourself the best way possible so you can get the best job that you might be applying for. I worked with a student a couple years ago who had a very bold purple top on her resume, and then the writing in it was black. So I asked her to print it out in black and white. And what happened was a big black blob at the top of her resume, and you couldn't read her name. I asked her what an employer might do. She said, well, my license number's on there. I bet they would just look me up. And I have to say, though that's very optimistic, that's not going to happen. If an employer can't read your information, they're going to pass on you as a candidate. So if you're at the point you're working on your resume and you need help, or you're just starting and you need help, reach out. I'd be happy to help you. And I'll talk more about that at the end. Let's do a quick cover over cover letters. So cover letters are your great opportunity to make obviously a good impression, but you only get a couple pieces of paper when you're applying for a job: your resume, your cover letter, and potentially your references. So it's important that you make the most of them. Your cover letter is not the place for you to regurgitate everything that you just put on your resume. If your cover letter is full of statements like, as you can see on my resume, you're really not using your real estate well. Your cover letter is to answer anything in a job posting that your resume hasn't, or reiterate why you're an excellent candidate. I love working with resumes. Cover letters is something I don't like writing personally, and the reason is your resume is very plain in that you don't need to exaggerate. This is what you've done. It's very objective. Your cover letter is basically answering, why am I awesome? Why am I the best candidate for this job? And it's a lot about bragging. That's not something I love doing, so it makes cover letters more of a challenge. That being said, it's the best way to show your written communication. A lot of job postings will say, we want to make sure you have great written and verbal communication. It's hard to share that in a resume. This is your opportunity to do that. You need to stand out from other candidates, so you should be answering these two questions. What can you do to make your hiring manager's life easier? So spell it all out for them. Don't make them work for it. If there are 10 bullets in a job posting, make sure you answered all of them in your information. And what could you do to help the company? How could hiring you make their life easier? Some tips for your cover letter. Just like a resume, it's great to have one ready at all times, but you're going to need to tailor that for the specific job. If all you're doing is to whom it may concern and pasting in a job, that's not enough, and employers are going to know that. You should be addressing it directly to whoever's in the posting. Depending on the field and where they sit, you can use a first name. It's just sort of more formal to not do that and say Mr., Mrs., or Doctor, whatever it might be. Include what you're going to bring to the position. Don't repeat, like I said, everything that's on your resume because they've already got that. Every sentence shouldn't start with I have, I did, I was, I brought. Make sure you vary that up a little bit. And this is very important. As I said, you should have someone proofread your resume, but you should definitely have someone proofread your cover letter. It's a lot easier to make mistakes here. And one last thing about references. You should always have at least three professional references ready to go. Those people can be your instructors, your previous employers, colleagues, people you've worked with. It's important that you have those and that they can speak to your skills, abilities, and knowledge, and that they're current. You should always ask those people so that when they speak about it, they can say, relevant information for that job, things they've worked with you on in the past, your strengths and weaknesses. These cannot be your family members. My grandmother thinks I'm amazing, but using her as a reference would be inappropriate. So make sure you have them ready to go, ask their permission, and share the job description. So, like I said, my name is Sarah Tianhara. I'm going to skip back to the beginning so you can see my contact info. I am happy to work with students on anything that they need, whether that be a job search, starting a resume, finishing a resume, editing one, your cover letter, your references, whatever that might be. I'm happy to work with you on whatever stage you are in that process. My office is in the Lakeside Center in 223, but I also understand that you have busy lives. If you want to shoot your resume, the start of it, wherever you're at to me via email, you are always welcome to do so. And I will review it via email, provide you comments, suggestions, maybe some formatting changes. And I will be very honest with you in that process. I work with students constantly on these topics, and I love to help. If you think you have a challenging situation, I promise I'll help you with it. So you can stop by or you can shoot me an email, and I'd be happy to take a look at those. If you ever need any assistance, even after you graduate, once a student, always a student. So you've got your first job, you're loving it, or you're not and ready for something else, feel free to reach out to me. If you've ever been a student, you're always a student. So I look forward to meeting you.